Welcome to this week's episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. On this week's episode, we look into who is really pulling the strings in America. Let's get started.
What do you make of more Democrats distancing themselves from AIPAC, that is the Israeli lobby? I think everyone who's running for president, although none of them say they are, but all the ones who are, including the two Jewish ones, have distanced. That's where the Jews are with the Democratic Party these days. Has it become toxic to support Israel? I think it has for the Democrats.
I think it has. The question is it right?
It's not.
I don't think it is.
No, it isn't.
I don't think it is. And I think that what you're having right now is a lot of people, when we saw what we saw on college campuses, what have you, and a lot of people, engaging in anti-Semitism, let's just call it what it is, that definitely becomes incredibly alarming.
I think it's a much bigger issue than that. I think when you're a Democrat and you don't take money from AIPAC, which they have forever, what you're saying is Israel is a monster country and this is dirty. It's a dirty country and this is dirty money. And that gives permission to a lot of people who are actually anti-Semitic to say, well, you know what, if a Democratic senator won't take their money, this must be a dirty country.
This is a clip from Bill Maher's Real Time with Bill Maher, featuring Stephen A. Smith, where they talk about the issue of if it is toxic to take AIPAC money. For those of you who might be less aware, AIPAC is an American political action committee that supports Israel. These are American people who donate towards one political action committee, and they try to lobby the government in order to support the state of Israel, or at least policies that would be beneficial or preferential towards the allyship between Israel and the United States. What is really interesting here is that Bill Maher asks a very good question, which I think came from the audience, which is Israel and AIPAC specifically toxic to somebody's political campaign? If you take AIPAC money, are you automatically seen as terrible? And as pointed out in the clip, apparently taking dirty blood money. This really isn't a new topic. I actually talked about this not that long ago on an episode, Season 5, episode 195, where we talked about military aid and how some people believe that Israel gets way too much aid and way too much military help from the American taxpayer, which I pretty much debunked. Similarly, and sort of on the same line whenever it comes to Jews and money, this idea of AIPAC and Jewish-Israeli lobbying somehow controlling the American government. And it has gotten clearly so bad that politicians are actively trying to avoid taking money from AIPAC, something they ironically never had an issue with before, just to ensure that they are not criticized for it. It has become, as they said on Bill Maher's clip, toxic. So on this episode, what I was hoping to do is to debunk this claim. Just like I had done with the military aid, let's debunk this claim, which is very often used. The reason that it keeps coming up is because it is, in fact, a very stupid talking point made by very unintelligent people. People who suggest that Israel and the Israel lobby literally controls the United States government. And they go so far as to, since the Iran war, suggesting that Israel told the American government to go to war in Iran, as if the Israeli government or Israeli officials could really tell an American president what to do. But people do believe this. So what we're going to do is look at the numbers to find out if this is actually happening. Is it possible? We clearly see that this is a talking point, something that people believe, which is why now politicians are being forced to hide or remove their AIPAC money just to not appear that they're controlled by the Jews. I guess we should start off with the very basic stuff, which is, what is a PAC, or Political Action Committee? For my non-American friends, a political action committee essentially is a legal way that a group can register that can take money from individual donors and use it towards elections in order to support candidates, support causes, whatever it might be. Now, some people might complain and say this is completely ridiculous and we shouldn't have these because it sometimes masks where money comes from, who's donating. It allows people to have a lot more influence on elections and politicians, which is totally fair. Unfortunately, this is the way that the Americans do work, and that's a whole other story. and pretty much outside the purview of this podcast. I don't talk American politics. But let's just say it does exist and has existed since the 1940s. I think it would be very hard to find any group of people who believe in a cause, whatever it is, if it's professional, countries, faiths, whatever, typically have a political action committee to be able to take their small dollar donations from their people and use it towards hopefully getting what they want in government. Again, you could have issues with money and politics and all of that stuff, and I am pretty much with you. However, it is the law of the land now, and everybody is doing it. So therefore, to select Israel only is a little disingenuous. The reason why many people selectively are concerned about AIPAC is because they'll make the claim that I don't really care that the dental industry or the real estate industry or big pharma has PACs because they're doing what's best for them. That doesn't affect world issues. We're not going to war for big pharma, and therefore it's a little different when Israel is calling the shots. Israel is telling our politicians what we should be doing. What is really ironic about this is the fact that the American-Israeli Political Action Committee is just that, American. It is not Israeli. It doesn't have funds from Israel. It gets funds from people in America, from Americans. If it wasn't, it would have to register as a foreign agency, which is a thing. Many foreign agencies and governments do spend money in elections, but they have to register as foreign lobbyists. So this idea that the AIPAC somehow is working for Israel and not Americans who support Israel is just not understanding basic facts. But as always, they usually don't care about facts. They just care about what it looks like. It says the word Israel, so therefore we don't like it. And we think they're meddling in our country. What is incredibly interesting about the fact that AIPAC is an American organization, not an Israeli one, is the fact that many of the donors are not Israeli and they're not even Jewish. There is a very large group of evangelical Christians, and frankly Christians in general who do support Israel, who will donate to AIPAC. AIPAC is a great thing if you like the state of Israel, and many Christians do. So not only is it not an Israeli group, it's not even necessarily a Jewish group. Although the numbers are not specific and we don't have detailed counts of who is donating to AIPAC, it is possible and likely that a large number of them are evangelical Christians. According to some estimates in 2025 to 2026, it seems like the evangelical population of America is 23 to 24%. That is 60 to 90 million evangelical Christians in the United States. If even a fraction of those people donate to AIPAC in support of Israel, which they often support, that is a very large number. Compare that to the Jewish population in the United States, which is about 7 million. Keep in mind that there are also other specifically Christian groups in support of Israel, things like CUFI, IFCJ, and a number of others that Christians can donate to. But funny enough, none of these people are accused of controlling the government. Only the one that probably has a majority of Jewish donors, that one is held to a different standard. Probably just a coincidence, though. American Christians supporting Israel? Totally above board. American Jews supporting Israel? Must be double agents for the Mossad. So now that we've gone over the fact that AIPAC is an American group, not an Israeli, not necessarily even entirely a Jewish group, we need to see what they're doing with their money to see if they really are indeed controlling the U.S. government. I think it goes without saying, at least for the sake of our argument, that people are suggesting that AIPAC runs the government through, I guess, donating to campaigns, telling politicians that if you take our money, you better do what we say. So in that case, let's look at the numbers. Let's find out if AIPAC is really making a difference and is actually making politicians change their mind or go against what they would normally do just for the money. Or as Representative Ilhan Omar once tweeted, it's all about the Benjamins, in reference to the money that people get from AIPAC. If we look at 2024, for how much Israel or AIPAC spent on election campaigns, it can vary depending on which campaign, what kind of year it was, but let's say somewhere around $50 to $60 million, which does seem like a lot. But in comparison, is it actually? The state of Israel itself, outside of AIPAC, gives about $3 to $4 million to the Americans for lobbying. This is official, on record, direct lobbying outside of AIPAC. So let's just say Israel and Americans for AIPAC give somewhere in the ballpark of, let's say, $60 million. This, of course, is direct evidence and proof that they are buying our politicians. Clearly, the Israelis are paying politicians to do what they say and to do what they want. And many people will make this claim. It is clear as day. You guys wanted a war in Iran. You paid $50, $60, $70 million to our politicians, and then you get your war. But one of the biggest flaws in this crazy theory of theirs is the fact that other countries other than Israel do exist in the world. And Israel's not alone. Because if you look at, let's say, for example, Liberia gives $235 million into the American election system. Saudi Arabia, $90 to $100 million a year to the election system. Japan, $40 to $60 million. China, $40 to $60 million. United Arab Emirates, $20 to $40 million. Qatar, $15 to $30 million. And then you have the State of Israel and their PACs that are roughly ranked 20th among the top donors. So you're telling me, or you'd like me to believe, that for some reason politicians only seem to care about the money from Israel when all of the other countries in the region are giving way more money? Why are we going to war for Israel? Shouldn't we be going to war for all of those other countries? Like, for example, Saudi Arabia and UAE pretty much hate Iran. So why is this Iran war? Not because of their donations. Why are they not the ones that are calling all the shots in America? It's, of course, Israel doing it with a fraction of the spending. We must get some type of Jewish discount for sure. 1 million of our dollars goes way further than 10 million of theirs. And just to be fair, I'm not complaining necessarily. I'm not saying it's unfair that these massive countries with tons of oil money are giving money into politicians in the States. It's legal according to the American system. All I'm suggesting is that why is it that the American government, which is bought and paid for by Israel, for some reason we don't have to pay as much, and they're not working on behalf of any of those other people who are giving more? The logic just doesn't make any sense. Not that there needs to be for these people who believe these pretty stupid lies. To see this in action, just to make sure that you can understand how little effect the Israelis have, let's look at a specific election to see how Israel did or didn't affect the issue, how their money may have supported a candidate. I want to be fully transparent here because this technically isn't my talking point. This actually came from Brandon Tatum. Online, he goes by Officer Tatum, when someone posed the question to him about how AIPAC controls politicians. And he asked someone to just give me any politician, anyone who gets AIPAC money, and let's look how it works. And that person happened to choose Byron Donalds, a Republican congressman from Florida. So that's why I'm going to use that one. But it's very interesting when you look at that specific issue, how on its face it completely falls apart. Remember, the argument is that the Israeli lobby, AIPAC, is controlling our politicians. And typically they'll say it's through money. So let's take a look. In the 2024 election cycle for Byron Donalds, he did in fact receive money from AIPAC. The number, according to the FEC, is somewhere around $84,000, which does seem like a lot of money. Clearly that's going to make him be pro-Israel because he has $84,000. Except when you look at how much his entire campaign received from everybody else. His entire campaign in 2024 was $2.3 million, which makes the AIPAC money about 3% of everything he received. So you would have to believe that he's ignoring anybody else who gives him money, 97%, and he focuses solely on the issues of the people who gave him $80,000. And that maybe you could suggest that this tiny $80,000 is what put him in power, is what gave him his job. I find it hard to believe. When a person has $2 million plus, $80,000 is pocket change. That doesn't make or break elections. That probably doesn't even get you out of bed in the morning to go talk to someone in Congress for $80,000. You've seen how much the Arabs give them. In the beginning of this podcast, you heard about how money from Israel is toxic and people should stop taking it because it's going to make them lose elections. On the other hand, how many people are looking into how many politicians, even on the Democrat side, who aren't taking Israeli money, are taking money from other sources? Those hundreds of millions of dollars coming in from Arab countries, they have to be going somewhere. And I'll be honest, if I was a corrupt politician and I only cared about getting in power, making a lot of money, why would I ever take $80,000 from the Israel lobby when I can get a lot more from the Arab lobby? This idea that it's all about the Benjamins and that this is all about money falls apart pretty quickly when you look at the fact that people don't receive all that much money, not enough to affect their personal opinions or to make things happen. And if it's not the money that's making people do things, well, maybe it could be people suggesting that the Jews control government because they're always in the government. There are so many Jews controlling everything. And so that's why they work on behalf of Israel. And that's why the American government is under the control of the Israelis and the Jews, because there are so many politicians that are all Jewish. But is this really true? Let's take a look at that. If you look at the U.S. Senate, there are 10 Jewish senators, which might seem like a lot, except there are 100 senators, so it's 10%. And then within that, I hate to say, you have senators like Bernie Sanders, who is technically Jewish, but let's just say is not necessarily pro-Israel, if you've ever heard him speak. So therefore, having 10 senators that are Jewish doesn't necessarily make us control anything. And on the other side, in the House, there are 24 Jewish representatives out of 435. Again, not a massive number. And also, again, the Democratic side usually has a lot of Jewish people who, let's just say, are not exactly pro-Israel. So all of Congress is roughly about 6% Jewish, which, yes, technically is a little bit higher than the 2% of our population. But this is not exactly control. 6% somehow controls the other 94%. This is pretty much ridiculous. And yet, people believe it. So maybe it's not the Jews in Congress that control the entire country, because obviously that's not true. But maybe it's the executive branch. The executive branch is filled with Jewish people, all telling the president what to do and making sure that Israel is first no matter what. The president of the United States cannot make any decisions without talking to his Jewish and Israeli handlers first, right? According to the current cabinet, there's only one Jewish person in the entire cabinet. Out of 23 to 26 people in his cabinet, one of them is Jewish. Not exactly a majority. And when you look at his first term, you have 2 Jewish people in cabinet. Where's all the conspiracy theory here about having so many Jews controlling the government, telling him what to do? And for a person who is so compromised by AIPAC, amazingly, he received $0 from AIPAC in his 2024 campaign. These are the people who are supposedly controlling him? The ones who gave him $0? Give me a break. Now, to be fair, I'm not going to suggest that he didn't have very wealthy Jewish friends who donated, which absolutely is true. But to suggest that AIPAC specifically, who gave him $0, or a friend who gave him a couple of million in a $20 million campaign, controls what he says and does, is very much unlikely. The idea that the Jewish people, or Israel through Jewish people in America, are somehow controlling the government just doesn't live up to the numbers. There are so few Jews in the cabinet, in Congress, the money and the lobbying is less, but somehow we are supposed to believe that Israel is controlling the entire government and not the people who are donating exponentially more, people like the Arab countries. It really is unbelievable. And if you know the facts, it's completely ridiculous. And yet, people still believe it. In the end, it really is remarkable how much people will just blame on the Jews. This idea that the Jews in Israel, which is an extension of the Jews, controls everything, whether it's banks, governments, starts wars. This 0.02% of the population somehow has so much control over everybody else. People will use these facts and figures that we donate so much money. There's something that's called AIPAC, and that's evil and terrible, and no one should touch their money. Meanwhile, ignoring everybody else who's doing the same thing with a lot more money. But somehow it's still the Jews who are doing this. The Jews are wrong. So it's interesting that we started this podcast with a clip about how it's toxic to take AIPAC money and how Democrats and, frankly, politicians in general, even on the far right, are against the idea of taking money on behalf of people who support Israel. And no one seems to care about all of the other people with their hands in the cookie jar. Whether it's the Arabs, the dentists, the real estate people, everybody's playing by that same rule book. And yet only Israel's the one who's called out for it. The only one that's toxic. Not the Arab countries that have issues with human rights. Not China, who donates even though they are an adversary to the United States. Qatar, who is the home of the Muslim Brotherhood, who helps fund American education systems to hate their own country. Not a single person complains about their lobbying. Their money ain't dirty. Only the State of Israel and only the Jews. If you are really looking to find out who pulls the strings in the American country and through their government, I can tell you by all of these metrics, it sure as hell ain't Israel, and it's definitely not the Jews. This has been another episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. Don't forget to check us out on social media at jdr.podcast and check out some of our other episodes on your favorite podcast source. We'll see you next time.